Okay, very good. Great. We are live. So, dear students, as I told you, our mission tonight is to cover the writing section with all its general aspects and also to discuss very especially the first task of the writing section because, as I'm going to teach you right now, the writing section is divided into two different tasks, not four as the reading section, but in this case, merely two different tasks, okay? And for tonight class and also for tomorrow's class, we're going to be dedicating all our efforts and concentration to the first task, okay? Well, let us start then with any other delay, okay? So the general aspects of the writing section. What can I tell you about this section? What I can tell you is that this writing section is designed to measure your ability to write in English in an academic setting, and you're expected to be able to present your ideas in a clear, well-organized manner. Now, as I told you before, the writing section is divided into two different tasks, and in this case, we are going to be talking very much deeper about the first task tonight, not about the second one, because I want to reserve that information and also, of course, practices for next week. But for tonight's class, let us just say for general purposes, that in the first task, we're going to have to write an essay in 20 minutes. And this essay is going to be an integrated essay, which means that as we've been doing before, we're just going to summarize material that ETS gives us for us to analyze. This is for the first task of the writing section that we are going to, as I say, deepen and immerse ourselves into tonight. Now, the second task that is called independent task is basically going to request you to write down an essay in 30 minutes explaining your point of view about a particular issue or topic they give you, okay? We are going to discuss this task next week. And as I say, it's not going to be, a preoccupation for tonight's class or for tomorrow's class, but we're going to leave this topic and theme for next class, for next week's classes. All right, very good. So last thing I want to talk about before I get into the first task, as I say, that is going to be our profundity topic tonight. I just want to make this clarification that is very important, I think. And as you can see here in my third box, I say, you'll type your responses on a computer keyboard. Remind that if you're taking the IBT edition, your test center will offer you an American keyboard. Therefore, you must be able to locate all signs and letters on it. Now, notice, dear students, that what I mean by this is, let us remember that when I was in the introductory class, I told you, right, very clearly that there are three different types of modalities for you to take this exam. And I told you, right, we have the IBT version, we have the home IBT version, and we have the PBT version. What the IBT version consists on is basically you have to register for the exam, you have to enroll in the exam, and you have to go to a test center in order for you to, of course, in order for you to take your exam through a computer in this building, institution, or school that hosts the exam, right? And in this opportunity, you have to, go take the exam, as I say, out of your home in this test center, and they give you an entire computer in order to take the exam. They give you the keyboard, they give you the screen, they give you a mouse, they give you, etc., right? All the things you need and components you need for taking the exam. Afterwards as well, when you are taking the home IBT version, notice that the first one was the IBT version, right? And the second one is the home IBT version. When you are taking the home IBT version, you have to take your exam also through a computer, but in this case, it's not a computer somebody else gives you, but your own computer, right? You have to use your own computer, and you must also use, as I mentioned, you must also use your own computer and your own internet, given that, of course, you're not getting out of home, because in the home IBT version, what you have to do is to perform and take your exam through your own computer, your own internet, without getting out of your home, okay? Now, and then we have finally the PBT version that, as I told you, is the most different one, because in this case, you don't actually have to, well, to write down or to take your exam through a computer, but you have to take it on paper, right? You read the passages on paper, you write down on paper with your own hands, etc., etc. Now, when you're checking the IBT version or the home IBT version, as I say, you're going to use a keyboard, right? And in this keyboard, dear students, you must write down your essays using an American English configuration. Let us remember that normally our computers in South America are, are basically set out and they are arranged in Spanish, that is to say, Latin American Spanish. And what that provokes is that, well, of course, we are going to be, having to write down with specific locations for letters, etc. But in American English, that is to say, in the American English keyboard, with the configuration in American English, the letters and signs and points and commas, apostrophes, parentheses are located into different positions. So as you are going to be required to write down your essays with American English keyboards, please, when you are practicing with me tomorrow and the other days we practice for the writing section, please make sure that you are going to use, dear students, that you're going to use an American English keyboard. And the way you do that is by going to the settings of your computer, you go to keyboard and you change the language. It's very simple. And all computers have the chance to change, as I say, from Spanish into English. So please do this, because if you don't do so, what is going to happen is that at the end, you're not going to be able to, as I mentioned, write down your essay, because you're not going to be able to locate the letters or the signs that, as I say, are different in the Spanish keyboard than in the English American keyboard. Okay, that was my last clarification. Is there any question with regard to anything I have said until this point, dear students? Something that I could clarify? Please tell me.
It's so clear, teacher.
Okay. Thank you very much. What about you, Abigail? Is that clear?
It's clear.
Great. Well, let us continue then. Okay, very good. Let us continue. So now let us go into our specific topic, as I told you, our special topic tonight, that is the integrated essay, the first task of the writing section, okay? So in this task, dear students, as you can see here, I have it right on my screen. You will have to receive two different information sources from ETS, a reading passage and a lecture, just as you received in the third task of the speaking section. I think that you already noticed that, well, the title of this task is Integrated Essay. And well, that is a resemblance to the third task of the speaking section too, right? Because in the third task, we were doing exactly the same. We received two different information sources, a reading passage and then a lecture discussing the same academic topic. For example, when you are in this task, right, in the first task of the writing section, the first thing you're going to receive, as I say, is a reading passage about an academic topic. It can be anything, right, from computer science until chemistry, for example. And the thing is that you're going to receive this reading passage, and it's going to be discussing, I don't know, let's say the French Revolution. So after you read this passage, they are going to give you a lecture to listen. And this lecture, dear students, is going to be discussing what? It's going to be discussing the same topic. It's going to be discussing the French Revolution. You're going to listen to a professor discussing this, etc., etc. Okay? Now, after you read and listen, in this case, dear students, your task is to write down an essay summarizing both topics. Just as you did in the speaking section, you remember, you had to read and listen and then to give a speech, right? Summarizing both topics. You do exactly the same here. You read and listen, and then you write down an essay. Of course, in this case, you don't have to give a speech or to speak, but instead of doing that, you have to write down an essay, as I told you, on your keyboard or with your own hands, summarizing these both materials, the reading and also the listening. No more than that. It's as easy as that, okay? Now, as I told you, in this summary, you have to summarize the reading, the listening, and please, it's very important, very, very important. that you take notes, okay, on the reading and also, of course, in the listening. And why? Because in this case, dear students, the difference, let's say, is that now the reading passage and the lecture are going to be longer than before, okay? They are going to be larger. You're going to receive, for example, reading passages of 500 words, or you're going to receive, for example, passages of 400 words, 500 words. You're going to receive lectures of 3 minutes approximately. And that means, of course, that you need to be very careful when reading and listening in order to take your notes and, of course, to prepare your summary later, right? So remember, your only task in this case is to write down an essay, summarizing the reading, summarizing the lecture, and being as a journalist, because in this case, you have to listen to information source, read the information source, and then you have to take your notes on those information sources and prepare a summary, right? And in this case, actually, you are even more similar to a journalist, because journalists, when they are working, they prepare a summary that they send to the newspaper edition of that particular date, and that is their work, right? In this case, you're going to do the same. You're going to write down a summary, but instead of sending that to the newspaper, let's say publication, you're going to be sending that to your reviewer, right? So you're going to be like a journalist anyway. Well, there you have it. That's what you have to do. Of course, I have a template for you to write down this essay. I'm going to teach you some hacks and tips for you to write down this essay, how to do it, what is structure to follow. We're going to discuss all of that. But before I continue, let me please show you how this is going to look like on the exam, okay? Because I think it's very important for us to know that. Okay, so when you get into the first task of the writing section, dear students, first thing you're going to see is a set of instructions, okay? As I always mention, it's not necessary for you to read this entirely. You know what to do because you are taking this by yourself, right? It's not something very difficult. So you press next, okay? Like this. And when you have pressed next, you're gonna be able to see the reading passage. As you can see, for example, look at my screen. The passage is way larger, right? In this case, look at it. It contains approximately 500 words, something like that. It's not something very much, let's say, different or difficult. It's just like 500 words or something like that. And well, that of course implies that you're gonna have to read this, etc., etc. So how much time you have for reading this passage, dear students? You have 3 minutes, okay? You have 3 minutes for reading this passage, and then you have to listen, as I say, to this lecture. But as I say, you have 3 minutes for reading this passage. Here you have a chronometer with some time on it, all right? And this chronometer is gonna be counting backwards with 3 minutes, 2 minutes and 59, 2 minutes and 58, until the 3 minutes are over. As I always recommend you, if you finalize reading this passage, that in this case, for example, is about Claudius, an emperor of Rome, stay here, okay? Don't press the button next, because better to use that time for you to think about your summary, right? Start thinking how you're going to summarize. And notice that in this case, your summary is going to be more complicated because you have to summarize a long text. And that means that you have to synthesize information, think about it very well, okay? Very good. So after you read this, the computer will take you to this next menu. That is nothing else than, well, the lecture, as I told you, discussing the same topic, right? As I also mentioned, these lectures tend to be longer than the lectures you were listening in the speaking section. So please get prepared for that as well. It's going to last for approximately 3 minutes, 2 minutes and a half sometimes, but not so much, well, not too much difference, of course. It's just a difference with regard to the duration, but anyways, not too much, okay? So you listen to this, you take your notes, of course, because you're merely able to listen to this once. And afterwards, when you press next, or the computer takes you to the next menu, this is what you're going to see. And here is where you write down your essay. Let me show you all the components of this screen and menu you're going to be confronting. On the left side of your screen, as you can see, you will have available, look at this very well, the same reading passage you had some instants ago. That is one of the advantages of this task, that ETS allows you to have the reading passage here. And by the way, this reading passage that is, as I say, the same reading passage you read until this point is going to be staying here for the entire 20 minutes you have for writing this essay. Because remember, I told you this already. How much time you have for writing this essay? You have 20 minutes, okay? You don't have more than that, but 20 minutes. You have to write down this essay in 20 minutes. And that implies that, of course, you're going to have to do it very much rapidly. But anyways, you have this reading passage here, right? So this can help you a lot. Let's say, because if, for example, if you forget something or you want to make some sort of addition, you just look at the passage that is, as I say, going to stay here for the entire 20 minutes you have for writing this essay. Then another part of the menu here, the reply box, as you can see, in this reply box is where you write down your essay. Let me, for example, show you here. You say, right, well, in the reading passage, we were, I don't know, we were introduced, right, to the topic of, etc., right? Now, as you can see here, for example, let me write down a word incorrectly on purpose for you to observe something. Let's say topic with K. Give it a second. Okay, great. So notice that in this case, the word is being highlighted with red, right? And what happens with that? If it is highlighted with red, dear students, that means that, well, in my case, this happens because I have Grammarly, right? Notice I have Grammarly. And it's telling me that my word is incorrectly written. Now, this is not going to happen on the exam, okay, dear students? It's not going to happen on the exam because, as you notice, dear students, you well, are not going to have any software or any application as this one, as Grammarly, that tells you when you are writing something incorrectly. You are the one who is responsible to check out your essay and to discover when you are making mistakes in your orthography, in your grammar, or in any other part, okay? It is not something that you can check out by any program or something like that, but you are going to be the one to discover that. And as I say, nothing tells you where you have committed a mistake, but you have to look for it by yourself, okay? As I say, this happens to me now because I have Grammarly, and it's, of course, a simulator, but on the exam, nothing is going to tell you, as it happens in Microsoft Word, for example, right? When you are writing something incorrectly, nothing tells you that. So that is very important for you to know. Great. Apart from this, as you can see here, you have a word counter below this reply box. Look at it. And this tells you how many words you have written, okay? For example, as you can see, until this point, I have written 10 words. If I continue, for example, I don't know, the Roman Emperor Claudius, something like that. As you can see, my word counter augments, right? And that's because, of course, I am writing more words. And this is important. Why? Because maybe you were wondering this. Yes, there is a minimum quantity of words that is required for you to write down in this essay, okay? You have 20 minutes to write down an essay of at least 150 words, dear students. Look at my screen right now. The minimum quantity of words you need to write down for this essay or task is 150 words. If you do not manage to write down 150 words, your essay is not going to be very well punctuated. And of course, we're looking for high scores, right? That means that we have to look certainly for excellence. So, as I say, in your essay, dear students, you have to write down at least 150 words. Certainly, if you write down more than that, you're going to receive more score. If you write down, for example, 250, 300, 350, fantastic, that's the idea. But at least your essay must contain 150 words in these 20 minutes, okay? That is the minimum required, but you can, of course, get more, and that is certainly going to increase your score in this task, okay? Very good. Now, last thing I want to mention. Here on the exam, there are going to be, on the upper side of your screen, there are going to be some buttons. There's going to be one that says copy and the other one that says paste. And yes, as you were maybe guessing, for example, if you do this, right, you select this part of your passage and you press copy, you can just, for example, do like this, and you can paste it here in your reply box. Now, please don't misinterpret that if you have this capacity here, they give you the chance to use these buttons and this ability. That means that you can, well, as I did right now, take a long portion of the passage and merely paste it there in order for you to get more words or something like that. that is something that you shouldn't do. Of course, it is possible, you can do it, but certainly the reviewer is going to notice it. And instead of giving you more points, that is going to reduce your score because, of course, that is not the correct usage of these buttons. The only legitimate use or legal use of these buttons, copy and paste, is, for example, when you want to make quotations. For example, you say, right, as the reading passage says, comma, you start your quotation, right? And you say like that, for example. But of course, shorten, right? Because quotations are never very much extensive. For example, like that. You close your quotation commas and you continue, right? So as the reading passage says, etc., we can deduce, etc., right? As I say, this is the only legal or legitimate usage of these buttons, copy and paste. Please, if you're going to use these buttons, use them for, as I say, quoting something of the reading passage. If you're not going to do so, please don't bother yourself to copy something and paste it because, as I tell you, you're going to harm your own essay. And of course, you do not want to do so. Now, you can make use of these buttons, as I mentioned, to make quotations, but also, of course, these quotations shouldn't be overused, okay? Dear students, you shouldn't be using this 10 times in your essay or something like that, but merely 2 times, 3 times is okay, as a maximum, let's say. So as I mentioned, please have that in mind. Don't get tempted. When you see copy and paste here, you can just use these buttons in order to make quotations, and very, very few of them, okay? Fantastic. So apart from that, there is a button that says here undo, which is basically the same then pressing, I don't know, Control Z, for example. Imagine that you erase all this, right, accidentally. So if you press Control Z, right, in your keyboard, that action is going to be undo. So you have the button here as well here on your screen, but you can do it with Control Z if you want. It's totally possible, okay? So please, you have all these options here in your menu, okay? And apart from that, that's all. Then the button next, that if you have finalized before the 20 minutes are over, you press it, and then you're going to be transported or moved towards the next task of the writing section, right? Fantastic. Now, is there any question, dear students, with regard to the menu of the writing section that I have exposed to you right now? Something that I could clarify with regard to this? Please tell me. Roy, Abigail, any question with regard to this?
No questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Abigail. What about you, Roy? Any question?
Can you repeat the meaning words that we have to use?
Yes, of course.
151? Oh, okay. I have that down. Thank you.
My pleasure, Roy. Yes, the minimum is 150 words, as you said. But as I mentioned, you can write down more. Please, there is no a top, let's say. Normally, like, let's say a very good essay that receives a high punctuation has 250, 300. For example, when I wrote my essay for this topic or for this part of the exam, when I was taking it last time, I wrote like 350, I think. So as you can notice, if you have a good grammar, good orthography, if you perform in the task correctly, and apart from that, you have a good quantity of words, well, wonderful. You're going to receive a fantastic score, and that is certainly what all of us are looking for, right? Very good. Yes. So apart from this, let me now, of course, tell you how to write down this essay. That is our next topic. So right now I'm sending your students to your WhatsApp group the template you're going to use for writing down this essay, okay? You have the document right now in your WhatsApp group. Open it, and if you open it, you're going to discover the following. Here I have the structure. I just send it to the WhatsApp group with an introduction and body. And here below, I have an essay that I wrote using that template and structure. And I would like you to, of course, have the chance to use it by yourself and to complete it, okay? So before we discuss this and read this essay, I want to have a chance to, I want to have a chance to let you have this reading, okay? So please, I'm gonna paste right now to the WhatsApp group the passage about the Emperor Claudius. I want to paste it right now. It's right there in the WhatsApp group, okay, dear students. And apart from this, I'm gonna give you 3 minutes for reading this passage, and then we're going to come back together, okay? So please look at your screen. I have the chronometer right here in my screen. You have, as I say, you have merely 3 minutes in order to read this essay, excuse me, this passage. So please start reading now. All right, great. Our 3 minutes are over now. As you managed to see, it's a longer passage, right, as before. We merely had 150 words, something like that. Now we have like 500. So yeah, it's a considerable increasement with regard to the quantity of words that our passage has. Now, after we read this, it's of course time for us to go and listen to the lecture on the same topic. Now, I want to warn you about something. And this is actually something that I wanted you to notice. If you read the passage with me, or if you read it already, right? If you read the passage carefully, you notice that this passage was talking about the Emperor Claudius, right? The Roman Emperor Claudius. And this passage was talking about Claudius in a very positive way, right? If you noticed. They argue that although some historians of his own time did not catalog Claudius as a good emperor with good, I don't know, instructions and works for his people. Actually, the passage argue, right? Claudius was a very good governor because he was very just. He was very much, I don't know, innovative, and he made a bunch of reforms that were very much important and necessary for the Roman Empire, things of that sort. Okay, now, as you can notice, and as I am remarking here, that is a very positive point of view about Claudius. Now, we're going to listen to this lecture, and as I told you, this lecture, the professor in this lecture, is going to be discussing the same topic, Claudius. But you're going to notice in this case, dear students, that the emphasis, the perspective of the professor in this lecture is totally different, because the professor is going to argue in a negative manner about Claudius. He's going to argue against Claudius. He's going to say, you know, Claudius was not actually a good emperor. He was not actually a good governor. He was actually very much, I don't know, he was very much cruel. He was, I don't know, unrighteous, etc., etc. So what is that the thing here? That this is a scenario that you're going to find right now of opposition between the reading and the listening is something that happens every single time, dear students. In all our practices, you're going to notice the reading and the lecture contradict each other. Sometimes the reading argues against the topic, let's say the French Revolution. So the reading will say, the French Revolution was an awful period for human history. And then the lecture is going to say, no, the French Revolution was actually very much important for, I don't know, for the upbringing of democracy, etc., etc. The point is that, as I say, there is always a sense of contradiction between the reading and the lecture. And this is very important for you to notice, because in the structure we're going to discuss right now, okay, after we listen to this, you are going to summarize both topics, yes, but you're going to clarify in your summary while you write down your essay that there is such a contradiction and opposition between the reading and the lecture. You have to express that there is an opposition between both materials, okay? Now let us listen and take your notes.
Now listen to part of a lecture on the topic you just read about.
The Emperor Claudius is a fascinating figure. He was traditionally portrayed as a vicious fool in ancient history books. But some sources, like the novel I, Claudius, which is a great book by the way, some sources portray him as one of the strongest Roman emperors. I want to interrogate that idea today. He certainly did a lot of good for the empire, but perhaps the traditional account of Claudius's reign, emphasizing the weakness of the emperor as a leader, is closer to the historical truth than the popular new revisionist account. Was he really as innovative, fair, and wise as the textbook suggests? Claudius definitely did some good things in his reign, like build new aqueducts and a port for Rome. But the biggest innovation of his reign, his coming to power by paying off the army after the assassination of the previous emperor, well, that would prove to be a dangerous precedent for the Roman Empire. It was a terrible precedent, in fact, and later, people doing the same things as Claudius would plunge Rome into civil war. As for Claudius's fairness, he might have created laws supporting the rights of slaves and expanding Roman citizenship. But, he was a notoriously bad judge, who was accused of making legal decisions without even listening to both sides of the case. He loved violent gladiatorial games, and had thousands of men executed simply for the amusement of the Roman people. He even conquered Britain to win prestige, destroying its indigenous peoples. So I wouldn't exactly call this very fair behavior. The text also mentions his wisdom, but, well, it's true that Claudius favored people like slaves and former slaves, but they were notorious for being corrupt. Many of them amassed giant personal fortunes at the expense of the Roman people and were subject to bribery. His wives were also famous for being murderous and disloyal. In fact, his last wife poisoned him with a mushroom, and her son would go on to become the Emperor Nero, who was one of the worst rulers of world history. Claudius deserves at least some blame for the disasters of his reign, since someone as irresponsible as Nero should have never been made his heir. I mean, it wasn't very wise to choose him for a successor, was it?
Summarize the points made in the lecture you just heard, explaining how they cast doubt on points made in the reading passage.
Awesome. There we are. So now that we have listened to the lecture, I think that you noticed, right, how clear it is that this passage is actually going against Claudius. And as I say, this relationship between the reading and the listening is always present in this task of the writing section. It's an endemic and very special characteristic and feature of the writing section, task number 1. Okay, so please have this on mind. Now, let us come back to the document I sent to the WhatsApp group, and let us see the structure, okay, that I was following excuse me, that you should follow in your response. As you can see here, we have two different parts in the essay. The first one is an introduction. And here I have the sentences or phrases that you should write down. And from this, you have to continue, of course, summarizing the topic. For example, the introduction consists of merely two different phrases. The reading extract leads off with, and the second sentence, nonetheless, in the lecture, it is said that. Now, scroll down a little bit, and you're going to see here how I apply this into the actual field. And that is how, of course, we're going to also use this template in order to write on your essay. Notice here that these phrases, dear students, of the introduction are highlighted with yellow. And here in the essay that I wrote about this topic, Claudius, these sentences, the ones that I'm using and copying here from the structure, are also highlighted with yellow for you to see where they are and how I use them into my essay, okay? So please have this on mind. Now, notice, what is the first sentence you have to write down? This one. The reading extract leads off with, and here, as you can see in my essay, the reading extract leads off with, and here you start to summarize very, and listen to me very carefully, very superficially what the reading passage said, okay? Look at how I did it. The reading extract leads off with the idea that Claudius was not a terrible emperor for the Roman Empire, and he contributed with illustrious works for his people. This is a very superficial summary of the reading passage, right? And that is how you have to do it. After you write down this sentence, right, that is the first part of the introduction, the reading extract leads off with, you have to write down a very superficial summary of the reading passage, okay? That's all you do. When you finalize that, you go to the second sentence. Notice, nonetheless, in the lecture, it is said that, and here, let me show you how I apply that sentence into the actual essay. Nonetheless, in the lecture, it is said that, and here, as I say, you summarize very superficially what the listening passage or the lecture said. Let me show you how I did it. Nonetheless, in the lecture, it is said that this optimistic understanding of Claudius' authority and deeds is actually inaccurate. And yes, I mean, I think you agree with me that this is exactly what the listening passage said in a very, very broad manner, right? Super superficial. So notice, that is how you use the template for writing your introduction. That is the introduction. As you can see, what we are doing is to contrast and pay attention to that word, because this word, contrast, is everything you need to do in this essay. If you notice, we are contrastando, the reading passage with the listening passage. We are contrasting the reading passage because we are exposing, right? The reading passage says this, but on the other hand, we are contrastando, we are contrasting that the listening passage said this other thing, right? On one hand, we have what the reading passage said, and on the other hand, we have what the listening passage said. This is a contrast, right? Un contraste. And this exercise of contrasting the reading with the listening, the reading said this, but the listening said this, the reading said this, but the listening said this, is exactly what we're going to do during the entire essay. We're going to write down the essay, and we are going to contrast the reading with the listening. But notice, when I am contrasting this, I'm not adding my opinion. I'm not saying if I agree or disagree with this. No, I'm summarizing. I'm merely summarizing, but at the same time, I am, as I say, contrasting both ideas. The reading said this, and the listening said this. That is the point here, okay? And if you notice, in the introduction, that is all we are doing. We are contrasting the reading and the lecture, no more than that. Now, here, as you notice, when you finalize the introduction, you write down a transition phrase as we've been doing in the speaking section, right? I'm going to proceed to expose both views, right? And very important, 2 points, right? Or column, however you want to name it, because now you are marking the beginning, or let's say you're marking, of course, let's say the initiation of the body of your essay, okay? Very important. So that's how you write the introduction. Any question, Roy, Abigail, with regard to the introduction? Something that I could clarify? Questions, Roy, Abigail?
No,
Something?
everything's okay.
Okay,
No
great.
questions.
Fantastic. So when you finalize the introduction, you come to the body. And the body is basically the same as I told you. We are going to contrast the reading and the listening. But in this case, notice, I told you, right, in the introduction, we are contrasting, but in a very superficial manner. In the body, we are going to still contrast, but we're going to do it in a more detailed manner. No more than that. It is exactly the same. Notice, the first thing you write down in the body is, firstly, in the reading passage, it is claimed that, and here, look at how I did it. Firstly, in the reading passage, it is claimed that Claudius was very innovative, right? Because this was the first point mentioned in the reading passage. And notice, the reading passage always has some points made in that particular material. They have 1 point, 2nd point, 3rd point, 4th point, right? For example, in this passage, right? Which one would be the first point? This one would be the first point, right? Because all this is, let's say, all this is the idea of the passage, and here we have the first point, right? Claudius' reign was important for its major innovations. That is the first point they are making. Because always, as I told you, passages start with some sort of clarification, and then they start with some points and illustrations. And here we have the first point. The Claudius' reign was important for its major innovations. And notice that the only thing I'm doing here in my essay, when I am writing this phrase here, firstly, in the reading passage, it is claimed that I am summarizing that point, the first point made in the reading passage. Firstly, in the reading passage, it is claimed that Claudius was very innovative, no more than that. And summarizing the first point made in the lecture, in the reading passage. I always start with the reading, as you can see, in the reading passage, and summarizing the first point of the reading passage in favor of Claudius, right? And as you can see here, this is not in the structure, the rest, but it's merely a complement of the first the first point of the reading passage. That is to say, I am clarifying. In this case, you can do that, okay, dear students? Notice that I'm not adding my opinion. The only thing I'm doing is to clarify what I mean when I say that Claudius was very innovative. And what do I mean? That is to say, he came up with remarkable works and reforms to the Roman Empire. The only thing you're doing here is to complement this first point with the information you got from the reading passage. You notice? This is the first point made in the reading passage, that Claudius was very innovative. And then you are complementando this point made in the reading passage with the same information they gave. You are not adding here your opinion. Notice, no, you are not adding something new that you knew about Claudius. No, you are simply complementing the first point of the reading passage with the same information they gave. That is to say, he came out with remarkable works and reforms to the Roman Empire, because that is what the passage told us, right? The reading passage told us he constructed remarkable works and buildings and made a lot of reforms to the Roman Empire, right? When you finalize that, the summary of the first point of the reading passage with a little bit of complement, it is not mandatory, by the way. You can simply write down this if you want. But this, of course, is for you to have more words, to make a better essay. When you finalize that, dear students, you go to the second sentence. Nevertheless, in the listening presentation, it is noted that, and as you can see here, what we are doing is to contrastar the reading in the first point made about Claudius with the first point made in the listening, that is to say, the lecture about Claudius. Because if you notice, dear students, the lecture also has different points. And these points basically or normally follow the same chronological order that the reading passage had. That is to say, if the first point in the reading passage was that Claudius was very innovative, then the first point in the lecture will be that Claudius was not innovative. And they are going to explain why. And that is what you have to summarize, very simply. Look at it. Nevertheless, in the listening presentation, it is noted that the only reformation and creative modification Claudius postulated in the Roman Empire was treason. Where am I getting this from? From the lecture, because I took my notes and I listened, right? Hey, no, Claudius was not innovative. That is what the professor said, the first point he brought. No, he was not innovative. Come on. The only thing he did was to to betray people. He brought treason to the empire. And here I am complementing even more. Namely, he was able to corrupt the Roman armies and to use them for his benefit, because the professor told us this, right? That he started to offer bribery to the Roman Empire soldiers, and that's how he got into power. by paying and offering bribery to the Roman armies. So, as you can see, I am summarizing the first point made in the lecture about Claudius. And I'm contrasting, right? I am contrasting that information with the first point made in the reading passage about Claudius. Is there any question, dear students, with this part, the body? Anything? What you have to do here, Roy, Abigail?
No questions.
Okay. What about you, Roy?
No questions.
Okay. And great. If you don't have questions, great, dear students. Why? Because the rest of the essay is exactly the same with the second and the third point. It's just the same. The reading passage had a second point in favor of Claudius. You're going to summarize that, and then you're going to contrastar that second point of the reading passage with the second point made in the lecture that was against Claudius. The same for the last paragraph here. Notice that we are having a separation, right? This is a first paragraph, second paragraph, and third paragraph, right? There is a space, look at it, between. And you have to respect that space as well in your essay. Look at it. The second paragraph. Secondly, in the reading excerpt, it is pointed out that, how I use it. Secondly, in the reading excerpt, it is pointed out that Claudius was a stray ruler and judge for his people. This is the second point in the lecture, in the reading, excuse me. Further, he executed justice and collaboration to slaves and facilitated the acquirement of Roman citizenship. This is the second point made in the reading passage about Claudius. And then, look at the template. The listening passage claims, notwithstanding, el pasaje de escucha dice, sin embargo, that Claudius was not indeed a just or righteous ruler. Likewise, he is said to have loved violence and the elimination of indigenous weak populations. This is the second point made in the lecture about Claudius, and I am contrasting that information with the first point of the reading passage. No more than that. Notice, right? I am respecting the structure, and the only thing I do is to summarize and to contrast at the same time. I'm not offering my opinion. I'm not adding any external information about Claudius. No, merely summarizing and contrasting. No more than that. Last paragraph. Finally, in the reading selection, it is stated that, right? Because there is a last point always, and you summarize it. Finally, in the reading selection, it is stated that Claudius was prompt to recognize the value of diversity in his kingdom. Namely, he disposed many political charges to previously owned slaves and women, a practice not very common in those times, right? This is what the reading passage said about Claudius in its last point. This was the last point they brought into the table. Now, how I contrast that with the point made in the lecture. On the other hand, in the presentation, it is mentioned that, and look at it. On the other hand, in the presentation, it is mentioned that his decisions were not appropriate and turned out to be harmful for the empire. The slaves he charged with power ended up being corrupt, and his wives were abominable. To top it off, his legacy brought us one of the worst rulers in human history, namely Nero. Notice that I am summarizing the last point made in the lecture about Claudius, that he was not actually a good ruler that brought new reforms to the empire by giving charges to women or slaves, because those decisions turned out to be harmful and terrible for the empire, right? I am simply summarizing what the lecture told us about Nero, Claudius, and also Nero, because they mentioned Nero, right? Very good. Is there any question, dear students, with regard to the template or how to write down the essay? Roy, Abigail? Questions about this?
No, it's all clear.
Okay, fantastic. There we are. So, we don't have a conclusion, by the way, dear students, because making a conclusion would be to make a summary within a summary, right? Because what is a conclusion normally? A conclusion normally is a summary, but all of this is a summary. So why should we bother ourselves to make a summary within a summary? It's just irrational. It doesn't collaborate to your case. It doesn't exhibit new information, doesn't demonstrate your skills at writing. It's just simply useless, as I say. So Concentrate in writing a fantastic introduction, including as many details as you can, and summarizing and contrasting very well the introduction and the body, okay? With all the points made in the reading and the lecture. Very good. Tomorrow we're going to practice this. You're going to have a chance to write down essays for me about other topics, not about Claudius, of course. So we're going to stop the class here, okay? Very good. So let me please take your assistance, and as I do that, please help me with your kind responses to our traditional poll, okay? Dear students, please help me with that. If you have any question, commentary, please let me know. Okay. Okay, thank you for your responses. Could you please help me with one more poll, dear students? You know that yesterday we didn't take the other poll, so please, we're going to take it today. All right. So sorry for bothering you. Please help me with that other poll. And here we have present Abigail Graciela.
Present.
Thank you very much, Abigail. And finally, we had Roy Bryan.
Present.
Thank you very much, Roy. There we are. Thank you very much, dear students. Great. Well, there we are. Thank you very much. So, fantastic. Thank you for your kind responses. And as I say, tomorrow we're going to practice for this task. Please make sure to have your keyboard configured with American English, okay? And to be able to write down your keyboard tomorrow, okay? Have a fantastic night, and I see you tomorrow.
Bye,
Thank you,
teacher.
teachers. See you